Okay, so that's going to be quite a video. So what are we going to try out to achieve today? This is going to be the test for a transformer. What is transformer? Transformer is a Neon 3 app that basically, puts a unicorn in your CRUD application. What that means is something that is best shown, and that basically will enable us to automate like our common operations, because we simply define how particular models behave. So let's basically start by setting up this project in general. So I call this tasks. Okay, so I'm quickly gonna make sure that I have the newest version of Neon 3. Actually, let's do global. And yeah, depending on my internet connection, this goes faster or slower. There we go. Okay, great. So now let's start. Neon 3, new app, and I call this app task. Fair enough. Let's create that quickly. So this will download the Neon 3 framework, and will also tell the repository that a task was created. And this is only basically counting how many Neon 3 apps are created. So no other data will be transmitted or tracked, as you can basically verify by looking at the npm package, because that's open source. Okay. And now I basically see that I'm in htdocs CRUD rather than task. That's fine. So then ignore the next step. So I happen to know that the only thing that really bothers me about this is the htaccess, which I'm going to change to CRUD, and my application should be running now. There we go. Okay, so this is the out of the box Neon 3 framework as it runs. It's intentionally ugly, so you can start working with it immediately. So what are we going to do? So we created a new app, and what we're going to try out today is basically the transformer. So let's quickly do that and say composer require Neon 3 apps trans, and actually we'll put a mouse away here for you. Transformer. Got that? Okay, so while this is running, the this is not going to be basically a front-end tutorial, so we're basically going to stay in the demo frame and not load any kind of framework or whatever. You're free to explore that in other videos I made, basically integrating Vue or Polymer, and you know what. So I am going to set up my frame demo in that case. Just leave that one in here, and basically say construct, and I want that to actually do that, but I also want to do, and actually let me just, so what you normally want to do is you want to use the credentials that are outside of the web root. That's a command, a Neon 3 command. So if you basically do stuff like, and I'm not going to do that now because I don't want you to see my credentials, but that is something that if you're interested in the like a little bit more security and how to keep that out of your you know, Git stuff and so on, then that would be the way to go. For the purposes of this video, I am simply going to define that in the construct, and I want to make sure that this is set and we're running on localhost. So the only other thing that I'm really interested in is the database name, and the rest will default. And the database name I created for this is task. Okay, got that. So that should be okay. Now a database connection should run under this frame. And again, this is not interesting for this particular video. This is more something that, you know, we're going to hack for now if you want so. So meanwhile, we're done with the transformer, and now basically let's create our first model. So let's basically create that and say Neon3 new model, and it's going to be called task. So we're going to build a simple task app where basically, you know, like I can create tasks and I'm either done with them or not. And just to show you basic CRUD operations. And I mean, of course, you can take it from there. So that model now exists. Let's verify whether or not that's true. So just as a little reminder, that's basically the MVC approach of Neon 3 is to have a model folder where your where your models will be, and in the components you have, and you can see that here, a controller and a view. And the reason why this is separated on a component basis and then the model outside has a lot to do with reusability and you know, how things would interact when you use it as a hybrid solution for front end, back end, full stack. And that exceeds a little bit this video, so that's not what we want to talk about today. But if you're interested, there will be a in-depth explanation of why that structure makes so much sense and is ideal for production. So anyway, we created our model now, so let's have a look at that, shall we? So this is our model. It's relatively primitive, and that will be normally what's expected, right? So you like get, you know, like a task by ID, and or you find them or whatever. So we're going to do something very different today, and we're going to say, well, all of the stuff that I'm, you know, supposed to build here, we're not going to build. We're going to go into the database and basically start, you know, creating. And oh, let me filter that out. That is not necessary. Okay. And we basically have to create tables. So let's assume that we have, and let's make this very simple, that we have a table task, and that has an ID. So we set those are UIDs, and we're using, you know, the DB app. So in that case, it's a binary 16. It's shortened, and probably we need a name, and that's going to be, why do I do this? Let's just assume it's a long name, and so some kind of status, right? So you can call this is done, and that's going to be bool, and default is 0. In that case, it's not done, and I probably want to have a delete date in that case, and that's going to be a date time, and default is null. Okay, so that's fine. Let's do this for now. Sure. So that's our task. Yep, looking good. And something that I'm not going to use, but it explains the transformer well, is like how a submodel would react. So let's just assume that every task could potentially have prerequisites, right? Yeah, let's assume that, or assignees, or I mean, you name it. So I'm going to say task sub, whatever that may be, and that has an ID, and that's binary 16 and is the primary key. Did I do that in the other one? I hope so. And then I have a task ID that's also going to be binary 16. I'm not going to worry about anything else. And that also has a name, right? Yeah, let's assume. It's going to be varchar. And so, and that also is a delete date. Yeah, let's just keep it simple. And it's going to be a date time. Yeah, and that will actually, we also need something like that. Also a flag for this, right? Yeah, and that's nullable, so that's fine. Actually, let's set that. Okay. So far, so good. So the reason why I'm doing this is so I can show you the structure later on. So now in our models, we have a migrate JSON. This is currently empty. So let's just tell, let's just read the database. Migrate models down. And we're probably gonna have the credentials. DB host is localhost, that is correct. The DB name is task, yep. The user's root, that's correct. The port, yep. And password is empty, okay. Done. So I should have, yeah, let me show you this a little bit more clearly. So I should have this right now where everything is defined on, and this is something that we're automatically going to work with. So that's nothing else but the table structure, right? So unfortunately, that's not smart enough to know what to do. So what we want to do is, and we installed transformer for that. So we're going to create a new transformer. So new n3, new transformer, and again, sorry with the mouse, and for task. So transformer is a part of a model, right? So I need to basically, you know, point it to the right model. Okay. That's why it also like says model task created, because it actually redesigned the model a little bit. So what do we have here now? So we have a task transformer, and it basically understands like what is our basic table structure, and the format's terrible. So let's go on the main section and say, okay, so the name is required. That's for sure. Okay, so what would that do is if I create a new entity, then I want to make sure that the name is set. So you remember that, you know, our structure has name is done and so on. So that's something I want to happen. And I want to potentially create subs as well. So what I'm also going to do is I'm going to do the ID manually and say, so the ID has a on creation, that's a listener, and then we can simply attach a closure that always has the input. So should I set the ID? And all, which basically would reflect on the complete pass-in that I get. So the model structure from the transformer, this is something you can't know, can have an attribute that is passed in. So we're simply going to pretend that that's the case. Let me basically declare this as, I don't know, let's say, well, give an ID. I know that it's always going to be ID. Okay, and I'm going to set this to false right now. Why am I going to do this? Because I'm going to declare main ID. And my main ID is basically like if given ID, then given ID, else create a new one. I'm going to use the DB here, and say UUID, and then I'll put that. Yep, that's it. that's what we're going to do. Okay, so here we're simply going to use that, use main ID, so we have it at our disposal, and basically going to say that should we not provide it, we're going to override it. Okay, so the main ID is input. So if it's set, right? Else use the existing main ID. Okay, and then we're going to return that. And since we are using, and this is something that you can look up in the DB, since we are using unhex and hex in retrieval and so on, I want to make sure that this main ID is unhexed at insertion time, so we can store it as a binary. Okay, then what else? So is done is something we have, and actually now that I think of it, no, we don't need that. We don't need that. Then the name is required, that is correct, and then we basically go into the deeper. So this can have many or one. Okay, so it's interesting to note that maybe sometimes you want to have a connected table that only has one relation. Let's say you go from a profile table to a user, and that user can only have one profile. So in that case, you want to set that to 1. If it's a many-to-many relation, you want to set that to many. So in my case, I assume that a task can have multiple subtasks or prerequisites or whatever. Okay, so also I don't like that. That will show up in my actual model, and I'm not really happy with that. So I'm going to call this prerequisites. Yeah, that's what I'm going to call it. And since that is not aligned with our database name, I can do, this is probably a little bit of a far-fetched example, but why not, right? And then I say this is actually task user, task sub. Is that correct? Yeah, that is correct. Okay, so here we can do the same thing again. So if I have something deeper, then it's not a simple callback. What it is, it's basically an array where I can go by field that is required, right? So I, for example, say the task ID, and this is how I'm going to match. Note how I did not, you know, like create a foreign key relationship here. This is something that I'm simply going to do by software if you want so. So I'm basically going to say, okay, so we're going to do this, and we're also going to use main ID, and we're simply going to return main ID. Okay, so if any kind of sub is created, it's going to use the main ID of the parent task. So that's how the relation is basically bound. And that's all I need to know. And then maybe something else. No, we should be good. We should be good. I think that is enough. So we'll walk through the most important things here. So this is basically how I do it. So there's like on creation, there's on deletion, on delete, on update. Basically that's what it does. And what we probably want to do right now is try it out somehow. So in theory, our setup is done now. So this is basically how do model changes behave. In that case, we only work with creation, but it should suffice as an example. So let's create a new component, right? So new entry, new component. Oh, actually, there's something important I missed. So in your task model now, so this is the kind of stuff that you don't need anymore. So what we're rather going to do is we're going to say static function, and it is called call static. What that does is, like, like models are created in what's it called, in a static form. So you are going to call models from the outside. So here's basically where the magic happens. So what we're going to do is basically we're going to pass in some arguments here. In that case, it's going to be as simple as return transformer. And note that you need to use that. My IDE does it automatically. And I'm simply going to say this, and then I have method, and I think they call it name here by default, don't they? Yep. Name and arguments. Okay. So I pass this in. So what this does is basically this executes a magic function if it doesn't exist in your actual model. So what that means is, like, should I have, you know, a static function test input, and I would execute that somehow, this would do nothing, and this would simply execute. But if you use like the CRUD operations that transformers provide, and you don't override it, then the transformer functions are used. So this we don't need, and frankly, for most models, you will not need anything else but this. So note that in theory you have a couple of possibilities of what to add here. So you can add here, for example, as the transformer. So what I could do now is to say, okay, this takes the task transformer class, right? And then assumes UID is true, and a different migrate path, because I don't want to use the migrate of task and so on. So I could do all of this, but since I'm within a model in that scenario where I say, like, okay, so this is the task model, I'm going to use the task transformer, and I'm going to use the task migrate, there's really nothing I need to do. Okay, so that said, let's start creating components and try this out. So I'm going to create a simple view. Again, I'm going to go down here and say new n3, new, and I don't know why I keep doing that with my mouse, component list view. No, task list. Yeah, that sounds better. And that is going to be a regular route component, yes. And I want to create a view, absolutely. And I want to use a frame, and the frame I want to use is demo. Okay. So let's actually try this out and say, what do we call it? Task list. Okay, so that runs. So in our components, we basically see the task list now. And that looks already relatively promising. So what doesn't happen is that the task list doesn't really, and it creates a view in a controller, and we need a little bit of extra help here. Let's actually have a look. So let's close all of this for now. Should be good. And we can see this is what it outputs, and that's all fine and dandy, but we want to have this a little bit more interesting. So I'm going to basically start saying, well, actually H1 is fine, and then say my tasks. And here is where I'm going to start listing my tasks, right? So I'm going to iterate here in a very simple way. And then simply going to say tasks as task. Okay, it doesn't know that. I'm simply going to tell him that that's fine. What? Alt-Shift-Enter. Okay. Fair enough. And here we're going to probably iterate. So we're going to say task. And in there, actually, we probably want to give this a running ID, so we can better deal with it later. So let's just say this is task, and then we're going to give it the task ID. Okay, and then here we're basically going to have a button that's going to do some on-click that we don't know yet. Or done. Let's say done. Why not? And say task ID. and call this check, and after that we're going to say task name. So for those of you who aren't familiar with that markup, basically Neon 3 has a very simple template engine that can do substitutions, so we would have to give it the tasks in order to basically proceed with that. And that's exactly what we're going to do right now. Let me just turn off. Let me just turn off my telephone. Okay, so so what you see here is that the like the frame demo is loaded, and then basically we're filling the main hook of the view with the view task list, which is this, right? So what we want to do before that is basically a callback, and the context is this very file, and the function is get tasks. Oops. Okay, and so let's maybe say private tasks. Okay, and this function doesn't exist yet, so let's do that. Oops, it's called get tasks. Let's do a pass in here that we probably won't need, but who knows? Actually, yeah, no, for the JS later it would make sense. So basically what we want to do here is we're gonna say this tasks is, and then we say task model. Okay, now let me think. We're gonna do find, and we want to find everything where is done equals is undone, right? This is 0. Yeah, that's what we want to do. Now, I don't know what kind of IDE you're using, but with magic functions, it's sometimes a little bit confusing here. It says like method not found. So why don't we actually start telling it that, yeah, those are the methods that we know. So let's create a, come on, let's do that differently. Yep, let's create that and say, okay, there is a method find, and that takes an array. Okay, so that should take care of that one. Nope, unstatic method. Oh yeah, how about that one? There we go. Okay, so now we know that find exists. In reality, of course, this happens as a magic function is created. Maybe just as a small side note, so there's a create, find, get, update, and delete, and all of that works directly with submodels as well. So there is basically and we call that prerequisites, right? Okay, so now there will be a create prerequisites, for example, as a function at runtime, of course. So let's first do that. So here we have our task. That's fine, and I'm not really sure if we need this, but I'm gonna really sloppily directly write to the yeah, let's do this super ugly. Let tasks, and then we're gonna say JSON encode this tasks. Let's write it directly to the JS of the DOM. Yep, and let's close this. Okay, so that should be fine. Now, naturally, we don't have tasks yet, which is a little bit of a problem. So that's probably something we should have started with. But how do we create tasks? And that is a very good question. So let's get back to our view and say, like, okay, we have here lists. Now let's make create new task down here. So how does this even look like right now? And if I'm in this tasks, okay, that's already interesting. In ops. Now, why is that? Oh, right? So what we should at least do is pretend that we have it. Let's pretend that there's something like this, tasks, and see how it behaves. Okay. Right. So this is it for each doing nothing. That's better than an error, I guess. So since that is a little bit boring without seeing something, let's basically create a form. So let's just say form with the ID form. Yeah, let's be that boring. And I'm not going to do any kind of action here. Probably going to catch it with JS. And going to have a very boring input with new task name. Okay, type is task. Yeah, that's fine. And basically, I'm going to have an input that is the type of submit and the value of grade. Okay, beautiful. Okay, so let's get some JS action in here. So we want to load this, and I don't want to do this as ugly as that one. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to create a JavaScript file here. So I don't know how familiar you are with Neon 3 as in general, but if I basically say it's a JavaScript controller, then it's just loaded within the view automatically. So I would basically have that here. And so what we are going to do is we basically going to start with the form, right? So I'm going to say form is document. And by the way, you would probably like use something modern and hip and whatever. I'm simply going to use plain JS right now, just so we're not like query selector and I call it form. Getting sidetracked by anything front end. So and then I'm going to probably listen to that. Add event listener. Is that called submit? Yeah, I think so. And so we're going to have the event here. That's important because that's basically, yeah, exactly. First thing we want to do is don't send that. Instead, let's say, okay, what's new task? So I could have probably done this a little bit easier and at least include jQuery or whatever, but let's do this old school. So let's say form, and we want to go to child nodes dot for each, and it's going to say child. And this can be arrowed because I declared it outside, so that's fine. And I'm going to say if child ID equals, and what did I say? New task name. Brilliant. Okay, so then we're in the right one, right? So should we ensure anything? Nah, it's fine. So let's just assume we're not validating anything today. And simply say, okay, then new task equals name, and that is then child.value. Okay, fair enough. So we should be good with that. And then we're simply going to say, okay, let's use fetch. Now a fetch post. I can do that. So start with base, which basically gives us the actual URL of the running instance, so I don't have to change anything with that in when I change to production. That will be automatically pre-filled. It's basically the same templating logic that the view uses. And then I say API v1, that is the standard API endpoint of Neon 3. And I say, well, probably task, right? Okay, task. Method is then post, and body would be JSON stringify new task. Yep. Yeah. Is that correct? Yes, I think that's all we need then. Okay, so this is when it works, right? So let's just verify this and then say, give me the results. Just a complete result. Let's see what can go wrong. So why might not have been initialized? How is that? How is that? But can that possibly be? No. No, it should be fine. Okay, so we don't actually have an endpoint task, which is something we probably quickly want to take care of. So we did this in another tutorial. So I'm just going to say new component task. And when it asks me, what I'm going to do is, if it, there we go. Let's say it's an API endpoint. It's going to be demo. I don't have many choices at this point. And I should have, where is it? Here we go. A post and probably a get. Okay, let's leave it like that. So what I would normally do, yes. So what you should do, and actually I need to mention this, right? Is secure this, right? There's a JWT, a JSON Web Token tutorial I put out. You can use session, you can do, I mean, whatever you do, but you probably want to have some kind of security of, you know, like determining what kind of API calls you accept. I'm going to simply do the task model for now. Again, the use is something that works automatically for me. Please keep that in mind. And I say task model create. And the only thing I really need here is body. So this will take care of everything that let me also add in our task model. So we have this will strip everything that is malicious. It will basically compare that to the model structure. There's really nothing that can happen other than it fails, which is something you should always take into account. That's why I'm actually going to change this to a try function and say the result is this. And here I'm going to say return the result after I catch, and this is just a regular exception. And what we're going to do here is, should anything happen, this is an API, I'm simply going to say throw a new route exception. So I'm going to start with a message here, which in that case is actually the actual message of the error that I want to have. And I guess the 400 bet data is sufficient in that case. So that's what I want to produce. So should that work, we now get the result, or actually let's call this nicer and say new task. Oh, come on. That's what we get returned. And well, let's hope for the best, shall we? Okay. So, and let me actually open up my, okay. All right, so let's try this out. And I say my first task. Let's see what happens. Okay, so from the network, that looks pretty good. And that looks pretty good. Okay, no prerequisites. That makes sense. We're not going to go on that level today. So we don't have those here yet. So that is probably something that we, actually for today, you know what we're going to do? Don't do this, please, but that should suffice. So now, see, now we have my first task. So let's just say buy some bananas. Yep. And just to get, like a little bit of basic here. I don't know how well you can see that. Let me actually quickly create a style sheet that I'm going to call task list.style. Again, that's a naming convention to basically bring it into, load it automatically. And that's just good to know. So here, I give it a class. Perfect. And let's just say task, and that has maybe a padding of 7 pixels and maybe has a background of sure, yeah, why not, and a border of 1 pixel solid. Sure. And when we do that, then we probably should give it a margin of 2 pixels. Okay, fair enough. Let me see how that behaves. Okay, that will do. Okay, fair enough. So, but again, this is not what we want to do. So what does this check button do? I forgot. What did we say? We said done. So let's basically create a function done here. And we're passing in the task ID. Is that correct? Let me verify. Yeah, we're passing in the task ID. So I'm simply gonna basically say if a task is done, then I'm gonna remove it. That's probably that's probably the easiest. So first thing we want to do is probably want to read the. So remember when we asked where was that, our task list? We added some JS here that basically said, like, hey, let tasks be that. So when I actually inspect my elements and go into the body, I see I clumsily just, here we go, here are my tasks. I've got 2 of them here. And I am basically capable now in reading that in. That's, like I said, it is a global variable. Again, don't work like that. It's just a quick fix and hack. So now I have basically access to that. And so now I'm going to say, whoops, let current task. Okay, and now let's get the complete entity. And so I can say tasks.filter task. Okay, so what I want to do is to basically filter them out and say if task ID equals task ID, right? Yeah, that's what I want to do, and I know that will happen, has to happen. So that's my task. Yep, pretty ugly, but works. So, and then let's say current task is done equals 1. So now we basically mark it as done, and now we shoot it over to the API, I guess. So let's use fetch again. Again, use Axios, use something, anything else basically. So I'm going to still say base, and I can simply copy this. I can copy this, and this, whenever you do stuff like that, then you already know you're doing it wrong. It's do not repeat yourself is one of the most important principles. So this API should definitely be in a module or whatever. I'm going to do update in that case, and here I'm going to say current task. And I'm probably also not going to reload. Am I going to reload? No. What I'm going to do is I'm just merely going to hide it. Yeah. So I'm going to say document query selector. So I have the ID. I'm just simply going to give the single. Oh, perfect. Okay, I did that already. Query selector. So the ID would be task ID, and yeah, just directly display is none. Okay. Okay. So let's try that out. There seems to be method not allowed. Okay, that's because we don't really have an update method. Okay, that makes sense. Update task. And array body. Okay, so just as a small reminder, this is basically how it is set up. So if you have a task, right, this is where we are. If you have an endpoint, then basically you just repeat the name of the actual endpoint, and before that you place your method. This is a little bit of a reminder of how the Neon 3 API works. And now I have an update function, and in that update function I'm probably going to try another an update of some sort, right? So updated task, and equals, and that's going to be the task model update. Okay, so I already updated that on the client side, so I just basically have to drop in the body. Remember, the only thing I really did was to get to the where are we? Here. The is done, I updated, so I did that work on the client. So if that is a legitimate change, so it works through the validator, then this should all be fine. And otherwise, and it's simply going to actually, yeah, otherwise not, right? Let's do that here again, and then basically say return updated task. It doesn't know the update, so let's teach it that as well. And again, our database should be perfectly in sync for that. Let's quickly verify that. So we have our two tasks here. And why would we have two? Let's actually check that. Oh, because the update didn't work. Okay, so that's correct. And so if everything goes well now, if we do it now, we should basically get, yeah, no errors. And if I verify back in the database, I should be able to see, well, oh, that is done is 0. That is 1. So that one is done. Okay, perfect. So, and we have simply hit it from the view, which is a little bit, quick and ugly, but now we can basically fire it. We're completely done with our app. So let's check it out. Get some more beer. Okay. Oh. Why do we have 3 now, though? So let's actually see. We probably have like some form of problem in here. So we have buy some bananas should not be here, right? So we're making a mistake in the task list. So this find where is done 0, that does not seem to work. Why is that? Why is that? It's probably because we haven't defined it in our model as something we can query. No, we have. We have. Is that a question of this? Let's try that out. Oh, we are getting that. Okay, that is interesting. I basically would be interested in whether or not I get those. Okay, it's done 1. Why is that the case, is the question. It's because it's bool. Do you expect this? No. Okay, we have done something wrong in our transformer that we should probably investigate. So, you know what? Let's do a quick deep dive into debugging of the transformer because it's pretty new, so who knows? It should be all tested, but I would be very interested in the validation process here. So this is probably really weird, but what I want to do is check in the transformer in the find. What the condition is. Or can I run the tests from? No, I don't have PHP unit on this project. Okay. So let me quickly see what's happening here. And that is the issue. That is the issue. Okay. Is done. Is not defined, and the task transformer is it's a typo. That really happens. That really happens. Okay. Okay. Well, you know how that works, right? So is done is basically what we want to register as queryable. So here we basically say, yeah, no, actually we're done now here, right? So what could we have? Let's get some more beer. Rate this app. Okay. And maybe do more fitness. Okay, so that's basically the end of this tutorial. So let me basically quickly, well, reiterate what we've done here. So this is basically what you would see from a logical perspective. So let's actually close everything and imagine that. So the only thing that you're really doing in the future, right? And normally, please don't go into vendor. You would create a model. In that case, our task model. This model does basically nothing. It's we're basically just creating like the functions that we want it to have, and you will find some more documentation of that soon. So if that is done, you basically say, okay, so we're using the transformer in order to facilitate our CRUD operations, and this is nothing else but defining how certain things work. If you ever work with Node, you might basically, like have that kind of thinking pattern already, where you basically say, okay, I want certain things to happen on particular hooks that they create a callback. So it's a little bit of a different approach of how a middleware would look like, but basically that's what it is. So this simply hooks in and transforms according to your needs. And so let's basically see what we need for that. So we need a migrate JSON for that. That's something that the CLI completely automates for you based on your database. So that's probably something you want to start with if you're creating something new, or vice versa. I can migrate up, so I basically can create a database from a JSON. That's also possible, and pretty likely if you're collaborating that somebody's going to give you something and wants you to install it. So that's basically it. So instead of basically writing a model, what you're going to do is you're going to write a transformer and simply define how things work. And in your actual components, you can basically use your model than directly with the transformer function. So again, let's look at the operations that we do. So we use a create in that case. We use update. And, for security reasons, I put that in a try catch block because I never know what the user sends me over in this case. And in the task list, I have a get or find or whatever, right, that would basically get me what I need based on my condition. And just as a small repeater, so there's a create, there's an update, there's a delete, there's a find, and there's a get. A get takes directly an ID, should I have that in mind. And all of those functions exist with any kind of sublevel that there might be. So just to basically show that one time, so what I'm going to do here, and this might be a little bit weird maybe, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically say, I'm going to simply do this mutable directly. So I'm going to say that the first task has a prerequisites, right? Prerequisites. And I'm going to add to that and say name is a subtask, right? That's all I'm doing. So I have multiple options of going about this now. So I basically can say I am going to say, okay, task model, update, and then drop in the whole task. But I can also say update prerequisites, and basically then just drop this part in here and associate it with the idea. So in that case, it's a little bit ugly, right? It's like, well, for this task, please, right? Or I'm simply dropping the complete updated entity in the update. And that's it. So what's important to know is, regardless of what you do, this will always be your updated. It will always return the updated complete entity. That makes it very predictable to work with. Okay, so I guess that's it for today, and please feel free to play around, and I'd be very interested in knowing what you do with it. So when you get bored, play around with it and see what you can achieve, and build some awesome CRUD applications with it.